All right. So today we're going to be looking at the spend and points-based loyalty program. We're going to take an in-depth look at all of that and really break down what you're going to need to utilize that, the different ways you can implement that, and hopefully it'll really give you a much clearer picture of the options that you have. So first things first, just kind of a breakdown of our agenda for today. First thing, we're just going to make sure everybody's on the same page with a visit versus a spend-based loyalty program. Then we're going to dive into the benefits of a spend and points-based loyalty program. And then that's when we're going to start really going into all of the features and options and components of how to get that set up. And finally, implementation. So we're going to look at several different examples of how you can run that based off of the business needs and things like that. And then we'll wrap up with a Q&A at the end. So first things first, visit versus spend-based loyalty program. So the types of loyalty that you have within the system, we're just going to do a brief review to make sure everybody's on the same page. Visit-based simply means that the loyalty program automatically gives each person that checks in 1 point regardless of a purchase or an amount. The spend and points-based program looks at crediting the contact with a number of points per check-in. How many, that will be based off of typically a purchase that is made. This can represent money spent or points earned within the program. Now, one of the things to keep in mind as we move forward, we are going to focus on a spend and points-based program that is the most simplified version of it, where when the customer spends a certain amount, whatever that amount may be, they get the same points equal to that amount. That is by far the easiest way to implement the program. You absolutely can run like a representational program where for every dollar spent, they earn a certain number of points. But as you will see as we go through, the points are put in by the employees. So if you are trying to do some sort of conversion or calculation, what that ultimately means is the employees are the ones that are going to have to make those calculations. This will ultimately kind of slow down that check-in process. It can open it up to, more errors and things like that. And so for that reason, we typically recommend that if you're going to go with a spend and points-based program, that you just keep it very simple, very streamlined. $1 spent equals 1 point earned. Now, the benefits of running a spend and points-based loyalty program are as follows. There are certain benefits to the business. One of those is that it helps ensure that the rewards or the coupons earned are based on the amount spent. So it becomes very simple that, okay, if they've earned 100 points, well, they've spent $100. And so your business can come up with a reward that is reflective of that. And that's a really nice way to ensure that your customers are spending money and how much they are actually spending. It also prevents customers from making really small or maybe no purchase, and ultimately that going towards earning rewards, which again can be really, really helpful for those loyalty programs. The benefits to consumers are that the process is actually really easy to use and explain. So conceptually, it's very easy to explain. Every dollar you spend, you earn 1 point. And in terms of what happens on the consumer side of actually engaging in this type of program, their process really doesn't change because, as I mentioned, the employees are going to be doing the majority of the work. So again, they're not going to have to be concerned with worrying about putting all that information in. It's really going to be on the employees. So ultimately very easy for the consumers to use. So now let's get into the structure, essentially the features that you're going to need to implement this program. So first thing that you're going to need to do is create a coupon or coupons for the rewards that are going to be earned. Much like with a visit-based program, you can have a single-tiered or a multi-tiered program. So how many rewards ultimately that you need to create will be based off of how you want to structure it. You will obviously need to create your campaign and market as a loyalty program. And then this particular function, you will need to use the multi-tiered option. And the reason for that is because, as you'll see with the single tier, it's very limited to where that threshold ends. A multi-tiered version allows you to have that limit at whatever mark you want. So maybe you want your customer to spend $100 or $500 or maybe even more. The loyalty tier is going to give you that flexibility to put that in. And we're going to take a look at that and show you how to set that up as well. And then once you've got those pieces in place, you're going to create a loyalty kiosk. And then finally, you're going to potentially need to create a kiosk check-in manager. This goes into more of ultimately how you're going to implement your spend-based program. As you will see when we start breaking down the different options, some use a check-in manager, some don't. So that's why this kind of is an optional step depending on your setup. So here, let's talk about some of those pieces that you're going to want to set up. When it comes to the coupon, one thing that you're going to want to do is make sure that it's easy to identify your reward coupons. And the reason for this is because you are going to have additional coupons that are going to be created over time. And if your customer wants to change part of their offer for that reward, you want to see that it's very easy to go in and make a change or to find it. And so that's why you want to find a system that you like that will make it easy to identify. And then we also recommend, it's not a requirement, but we do recommend that you add that loyalty progress option onto your coupon widget. So we're going to take a look at that real quick. So I'm going to hop into my account. Oops, sorry about that. There we go. So here I'm going to log into here and go to my coupons. So for my coupons, I went ahead and I set up 2 different offers. I labeled them rewards. So again, very quickly, I can identify which ones I'm using for my loyalty program versus which ones I'm using for happy birthday offer, a text blast, all that good stuff. Now, to add in the loyalty progress option into your widget, what you're going to do is go into the widget, go down to the mobile coupons page, and then at the bottom here, you're going to select your show loyalty status. You're going to mark that as yes. And then here you can label your loyalty program, whatever you would like it to be, and then select your keyword for that. Here you would add in that option, and now if we go up here to the My Coupons button, you'll see that the loyalty status is now there. Obviously, this will ultimately depend on the loyalty program that you have in place. You can change all of the aesthetics and even the icon if you would like. But again, it's really about making it very accessible for customers to check their loyalty status at any time. Okay. So moving on to the loyalty campaign, first things first, you will need to create a campaign if you haven't already, or you can edit an existing campaign and you're going to add in that loyalty component. So here we're going to turn on the opt-in management to loyalty, and we're going to use that multi-tiered option. So if we pull that up and we head over to our campaign, I've got my keyword here. Now, I've already created a keyword. Right now, it is a basic mobile opt-in program. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go over to my opt-in management. I'm going to turn that on, market to loyalty, multi-tiered, because as I mentioned, you want to make sure you're giving yourself the most flexibility to have those points at the levels that you want. And then kiosk check-ins, yes, go ahead and hit update to save those settings. And then here's where we go ahead and create those tiers. So it's very simple. Again, if you've ever created a multi-tiered system, this process looks identical. So first thing, let's say I'm going to create my first level at 100 points. I'm going to label it as such just to keep it simple enough. And then the reward that they get is a $10 off any purchase coupon. Here, instead of keeping my numbers relatively low, if I were doing a visit-based, I would just increase that number to 100. Here, again, I just put in my reward message. And remember, tilde, redeem, tilde for these coupons. And then I hit create. Now I've got my tier created. As I mentioned, you can stop here. You could simply have it set at the 100 tier, and that is it. For our purposes, I'm going to go ahead and create a second tier just so we have that in there as well. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have a larger coupon offered. If somebody earns 500 points, which would be $500, they get a larger offer. Tilde, redeem, tilde. And then we hit create. Okay. So right now, again, very simple, very straightforward. We have our tiers created. The one thing to remember here is if you end up needing to change out your message, or maybe you need to change out the offer, you cannot simply edit the message. What you would need to do is go ahead and recreate it. And again, it's a very simple process. You put in the same information, and maybe in this case, I just needed to change my message. So I would change that. And then again, I would attach my coupon. Now, I haven't deleted out the existing one. All I'm going to do is put in the new information, hit create, and the system is actually going to replace what was there with the new information. So anytime you need to make an adjustment to your loyalty program in the multi-tiered system, remember, just recreate, don't try to delete or anything like that. Okay? So now that we've got our feature all set up, I attached my coupons as we saw. And then again, this is just kind of an extra note reminding you that you can't edit it. You just need to go ahead and recreate it. But now my loyalty campaign is all set. So now we can move on to the next component, which is the loyalty kiosk. So for this piece, again, we're going to be creating a loyalty kiosk. The biggest thing here is the check-in plus data capture button. So many times we've used that button to collect information about the customer, whether it be a birthday, a first name, anything like that. For this purpose, if we're doing a spend-based program, we need to, instead of trying to capture data, we need to use the quantity selector option. This is going to allow for those points to be put into the kiosk. Now, alongside that, we also want to ensure that the employees are aware of the points that are being put into the kiosk. And so that's why we have this manager password that you'll want to create for the employees to put in order to approve, if you will, of that particular amount of points that's being entered, as well as a max value. As you'll see in the slides, you can go up to 30,000, but ultimately this is variable depending on the program. So for instance, if your typical ticket item is only $50, you may not want somebody putting in 500 or 5,000 because probably means they added too many zeros. So putting in a max value that's going to make sense with the business is, again, just going to help to prevent some of those errors that can occur. You absolutely want to make sure, if this is something that the customer is going to see, that that password is put on there. Obviously, depending on how you implement it, there are scenarios in which you don't need a password, and we're going to get into those as well. But again, for now, the simplest way is to go ahead and turn the password on. And then from here, again, if you want to have customers be able to redeem coupons on a kiosk, you would put that information in just like you would a typical kiosk. Nothing has to change on that front. And then again, you would choose a template just like any other to complete your kiosk setup and go ahead and create it. Now, once they're in here, there are a few modifications that you need to make. By default, you'll see this button is labeled for different types of information. So what you'll need to do is go here to the loyalty and data page and change the first data and the second data input. The first data input is going to be the points. So enter points, enter spend, however you are referring to it, that's what you'd want to put here. And then the second data input is actually the PIN number for the employee. So again, you can put in employee PIN, you could put in employee only. Ultimately, again, this is going to come down to how it's being utilized. So now if we go and click on it, now it's going to make sense. Here is where the phone number is entered. They then enter the points and then the PIN number for that particular setup. Again, you can modify your kiosk as much or as little as you want to, depending on whatever else you're looking to highlight or to add in terms of aesthetics and things like that. But those are going to be the basic pieces that you're going to need in order to have a kiosk set up to accept points into the customer's check-in. So now that our kiosk is created, let's talk about the kiosk check-in manager component. So as I mentioned, this may ultimately be an optional step depending on how you want to implement it, but it is important to note how that would get implemented. So again, creating the kiosk is intrinsic to then being able to run a kiosk check-in manager. So that has to be created beforehand. Once you create your check-in manager, then you can create your PIN numbers. So to create that check-in manager, what you would do is come up here to the KCM button. You would create. Personally, I definitely recommend changing the time to better suit what you're going to be using it for. You've got all of these different options, which again will vary greatly depending on how your employees are going to utilize the check-in manager. So let's update this. And then we want to make sure that we add in our PIN number. So let's put in our PIN and then hit add. Another thing to keep in mind is once you create a PIN for an employee, you do have the ability to restrict how many points they can add, how often they can add it, things like that to each employee. So you have a lot more restriction that you can put on different employees depending on the comfort level with that employee with adding points. So that's a very nice option to have there. Once you've got your pieces in place, then you can go in and launch your check-in manager. And from within here, this is where you can now, the employees can either check customers in, they can adjust points within here. Ultimately, this is going to come down to how you structure that out. And so this is, again, just a little screenshot. When you've got their loyalty program, it will show you their loyalty status. And you can manually adjust those points according to their purchases. And again, we'll show a couple more examples of this as we look at the different options available. So now that we know the basic components, if we're going to be setting up a spend-based program, now we're going to delve into some of the ways we can implement these programs. And again, one of the big things to keep in mind is each business is going to be unique. So you're not going to be able to just say, oh, this is my program, everybody can work it the exact same way. As you're aware, every restaurant, every retail, every different industry has their own way of operating. And so that's going to ultimately affect how you want to run your spend-based program. If you have a good understanding of how that business runs, it's going to help you make the most informed decision as to which of these implementation scenarios we're going to go through is going to be your best option. So here what we have is a customer-facing kiosk. So a couple of the things that you're going to need in order to run that program. First off, again, just like what we did before, when you're creating that kiosk, your button is going to need to be set to the check-in plus data capture, where the capture mode equals the quantity selector. You will want to set that password for employees to put in alongside the amount that's being put in. And then, as I mentioned, that max value is going to be variable ultimately because it's going to be dependent on how high your loyalty tiers go and what number is going to make sense for that as a result. Now, I've created an example of this just so we have a look at that. So let's go in there. So our customer-facing kiosk, the way this has been structured out, it looks pretty straightforward. What this is it's got its nice display. We let them know that they can join and then they can earn points every time they shop or they dine, again, depending on the business. And then when they click this button, this is what they see. The customer is able to put in the phone number themselves. However, the employees would be the ones entering the points and providing the PIN number. It's only after those two pieces are put in that the enter button can be hit and the system will go ahead and accept the points along with the check-in so that the customer earns maybe 10 points or 50 points today, whatever that amount may be. So one tablet with the kiosk where both the customer and the employee work together to enter that information. The next option is an employee-facing kiosk. So instead of giving the customer the opportunity to put in the number themselves, the employee takes it upon themselves to go ahead and enter all of the information. In terms of functionality, it's very, very similar. The check-in button would be the same. You would still be selecting the quantity selector. You'd still want that password on there. And again, that max value would depend on the program. The added step to this particular setup would be that you would need to add a double opt-in filter onto the campaign. And the reason for that is when we were showing the customer-facing kiosk, customers are putting in their number and they're seeing this disclaimer language below. So they are being made aware of what they are signing up for before they're actually opting in. If the employee is entering all that information, the customers are not given that opportunity to give their express written consent that they do in fact want to receive text messages and partake in the loyalty program. So the double opt-in will be absolutely necessary in order to make sure they are understanding exactly what they're signing up for and giving their consent to it. I also have an employee-facing kiosk. And this is visually a little bit different. The reason I did this was because I just wanted to highlight, since the customers aren't going to see this, you don't have to add in the rotating images. You don't have to add in, all of the glitz, if you will, because this is really just going to be used for the employee side. So the employees just need to have access to the buttons to be able to enter the information as necessary. The only thing I did, again, is I changed the label of the button simply to remind the employees that this button would be used whether it's a join or a check-in. But notice here, it's almost identical. The only thing I changed was I wrote enter PIN instead of employee only, since, again, this is facing the employees. We don't have to kind of keep it a little bit more hidden, if you will, as to what the employees have to add. So other than that, again, functionally speaking, it's going to work very, very much the same. It's just going to be facing the employees instead of the customer. The other option that you have is an employee-facing check-in manager. As I mentioned, if you want to run a check-in manager, you absolutely need to create a kiosk for that process. So again, your settings are going to start with that check-in plus data capture button. The mode is still going to be quantity selector. Here, though, you don't need the password option on the kiosk, because ultimately the kiosk is not going to be utilized. Instead, the PIN numbers through the check-in manager are going to be utilized. The max value, again, you can absolutely set that to the limit that makes sense for the program that you have in place. And again, because it is employee facing, you want to make sure customers are sent that double opt-in message so that they can consent to receiving ongoing text messages. Once you've got your kiosk created, that's when you're going to go into your check-in manager and you're going to enable that and you're going to create the pins. So with that sample, let's go over here. So here we have our employee-facing check-in manager. So again, I kind of did this in some brighter colors. They might not work so well. And the reason, again, was to emphasize that this isn't going to be used by anybody. This is really more to make sure that you've got the functionality to be able to add points in the check-in manager. But this is not going to be displayed anywhere. You're not going to be giving this to anyone. What you are going to be doing once you've created your kiosk is creating the check-in manager. So here, the check-in manager has already been created. Then I come over here to put in my PIN number for my employees. From here, again, you can change your settings depending on what you want. One thing to keep in mind is the employee tracking. If you're going to have a bunch of different PINs for employees and they're all going to be putting in points, you absolutely may want to turn on the employee tracking so you've got that data in the system as well. Once you've got your settings created, then you can go ahead and launch your check-in manager. The URL is what you would give to your employees. Now in here, you've got your customers. If it was a new customer, your employees would use the new check-in button where they could put in the customer's number and the points that they have earned today. And then they can go ahead and check them in. Okay, it'll also let the employees know how many visits remaining until the next reward. If they needed to make any adjustments, you can go into the contact profile as well, and you can adjust it in here. If it's just a small amount that needs to be adjusted, you can use the little plus or minus button. If you want to add a larger number, you can adjust the points manually right here, or you can use these buttons to add bulk amounts very quickly. Excuse me. Ultimately, though, all the customer would be given is the check-in manager. So they would be given that URL, and that URL is what they would use to check customers in, add their points, adjust their points, all that stuff. Again, because they would be doing that, you need to make sure that double opt-in filter is on the campaign. The next option is a combination of a customer-facing kiosk and an employee-facing KCM. What this does is it allows the customers to be able to enter in their number themselves using the kiosk. And then from there, the points are ultimately managed by the employees through a check-in manager. They can adjust that loyalty progress according to how much purchase was made at the time. Whoops, excuse me. And then from there, to see what that would look like, our sample is right here. So notice again, this one, we have a slideshow. We've got it nicely branded for our business. And notice with the button, I've actually chosen the just the simple loyalty check-in button. What this does is just allow the customer to check in. We're not having to grab the employee and have them put in the information on the kiosk along with their PIN. Instead, what we're allowing the employees to do is use the check-in manager and that URL with their PIN number to adjust the points after the fact. So here I enter my PIN number. Here my customer has checked in already. So what I'm going to do as the employee, I'm going to go into their profile and I'm going to adjust those points according to what they just spent. So maybe they spent $42. I'm going to update that total, and now the system will adjust it momentarily with that new amount. So here is a combination of both. What's nice about this, again, is you can have customers checking in, and if they are spending and making a purchase, then the employees have the opportunity to add in those points accordingly. Now, with that, you do want to be careful that if the employees, as you see here, they do have the option to put in a number themselves. Because they can do that, you may want to go ahead and put on a double opt-in filter if the employees are going to be taking it upon themselves on occasion or regularly putting in the number for the customer. Again, you want to make sure customers know what they're signing up for. If you speak to the employees and you basically tell them never use that button, and they're never going to use it, they only ever really use this page and then going into the profile to adjust points, then you may not necessarily need that double opt-in filter on it. And then, yes, again, this is just highlighting keep active if employees use the new check-in button on the KCM. Here, again, the check-in manager you would enable, you would create the employee pins. You can use the employee tracking if you would like. Again, depending on how many employees are going to be putting in points for the customers, all of those things. And then the last option is an employee-facing check-in manager with API. So this has become a much more popular option as of late. POS systems do have more API capabilities, and we've seen that grow with systems such as Square and Shopify and Gloria Foods. Because they allow for that, you can take purchases and transactions that are occurring through the POS system using our API, send that information into our system, and then run a loyalty program through our system that way. Now, in order to use that API option, it does require some investigating into the POS system and its capabilities. So what that means is not all POS systems are created equal, and some allow for API connections, some do not. Sometimes it comes down to the plan that the business is using. Maybe the plan that they're on doesn't allow for API capabilities, but if they get a different plan, maybe they are available. So this is where you really have to figure out what those options are going to be. Ultimately, when you find that information out, the structure and components that you'll ultimately need to set up that type of program are going to rely heavily on the POS system and the needs of the business. So doing some really good research as to what the POS system offers, what the business needs in order to run the loyalty program is going to be crucial in finding out if this is a viable option for that business. One of the things that we strongly recommend is to create a flow chart to identify those needs. What that means is by creating that flow chart, it can really give a great visual representation ultimately of how you want that process to go. So now you have a very clear picture going into it. It's going to make that whole API process much, much easier. Once you've done a thorough investigating of the POS system and the business needs, that's when you can go ahead and reach out to us, and we'll be happy to provide you with the next steps in creating that API connection. The one really nice thing about the API, again, is if once that gets set up, no one is actually having to enter in those points. It's simply going to be put into our system from that POS system. So it does take a little bit more to set up, but then again, on the daily, you're having to input less data as well. So it's a nice option. Just make sure to do your research and get that all set beforehand. All right, now hopefully this has given you a really good insight into the different options you have when creating a spend or points-based loyalty program. And now I highly encourage you to create one, test it through, and find out what it's capable of. And any questions? Let me open it up here.
Hi, everyone. This is Omer. Just wanted to real quick chime in while Juliet's scanning the questions that came in. I think Lori did a pretty good job addressing and answering all those questions as they came in. There was a question about the check-in multiplier doubling or multiplying points. That currently does not function as perhaps you would want it to function. It does multiply the check-in, but it does not multiply any points that get added or accrued. That is not necessarily in our immediate timeline for development, but it's certainly something we'll add to our list and see if we can accomplish in the short term. There are many different configurations for the check-in manager and the kiosk and mobile club and loyalty program, single tier, multi-tier, check-in-based, spending-based, right? So the list kind of goes on and on and on, and I think the main takeaway is that there is no standard configuration. So a lot of it has to do with probing and asking the right questions from your customers. What do they want? What are they looking for? Do they want the customer entering the information? Do they want the staff entering the information? And then based on that feedback, you then determine the best configuration. We have been doing much more of the dual screen implementations where a customer has the customer-facing kiosk to enter the number, and then the staff has the check-in manager on an employee-facing tablet where they can then administer that check-in, add reward points, update a profile, redeem a coupon, do things like that. And so that has been kind of our go-to setup as of late. If any of you on this call are interested in a similar configuration where you have a dual screen tablet, we are just about to place an order for more dual screen stands. The dual screen stands can be white or black. They're powder coated white or black, and they have two faces to mount both sides, both tablets. I'm in the process of pinning down some pricing for quantities of 50 or 100 bulk order. So if any of you are interested in a dual-facing kiosk stand, please reach out to myself or Lori or Juliet as a support email and let us know. We're looking at approximately $40 or $50 per stand for the cost of those stands. The cost of steel has gone up. We are exploring other materials like aluminum as well, potentially to reduce that cost. But I plan on making that order here in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So if any of you are interested in purchasing 5 or 10 stands or more potentially, reach out and let us know so we can incorporate that into our bulk order. I don't have anything else on my end. Lori or Juliet, is there anything else that you'd like to add prior to wrapping up the call? Thank you, by the way, Juliet. You did a phenomenal job again. Appreciate it.
Excellent.
I just want to say thank you. Sorry, Juliet, I'm going to chime in here real quick. I just wanted to say thank you for the questions. It's always important for us to see feedback, get some idea of some interests, some concerns, some focuses that you guys have. It helps us present a better workshop, understanding some of those pain points for you and help guide in the right direction. And so I like Omer said, I was replying back and forth, and you can see them in the chat. We'll also include the questions in the workshop documentation, and so you'll see those questions that were asked, the answers that were given, and with the exception of maybe reporting, I think we got to most of them. And so I just want to thank you for that. Your participation helps, and so please, anytime when we send those emails out for these workshops coming up, there is a prompt in there for you to be able to ask questions ahead of time. And so if you submit your questions on the topic that's going to be coming up, we can see how we can answer them and work them into the presentation and get them answered for you ahead of time. And so back to you, Juliet.
Yeah, I was looking over the chat. Like you said, most of it looks like it was covered. I think like that there's a couple questions about reporting that we'll definitely take a look at and see about maybe incorporating that into one of our workshops in the future to really do a deeper dive on some of those reporting options and or add maybe some supplemental material depending on what we're looking at. So other than that, hopefully this was super informative and gave everybody some good options moving forward to think a little bit differently about spend and points-based programs. And yeah, have a great afternoon, everyone.
Okay, thank you very much. Have a great afternoon, everyone, and a good coming weekend. Thank you so much.